I grew up Jewish. I didn't find love within that community. And so I kind of just been on my own, researching on my own. So I would consider myself more of like a mystic than anything else. I believe God's name forever is I am. And I think that Jesus is buried within me. And I think that David is the son of God, and David represents humanity and the stench of humanity.
The typical student your age buys into something called moral therapeutic deism, which is moral, you set your own morality. What's true for you is true for you. What's true for me is true for me. Moral, therapeutic, God is my therapist, and so God is always there for me when I feel bad. And then deism, which is God is kind of aloof, he's kind of out there. So I think what we're trying to communicate is the typical person your age and below will say in the US, they'll say, that's kind of my definition of God. That's how God has revealed himself to me. And that's not like a selfish thing, but it's more so I want to define God as how I want to define him. And that has primarily been a pushback against church abuse. So I've been hurt in the church, so I want to be spiritual but not religious. And spiritual but not religious basically just means I don't like what's going on with the authority structure in the church. Too many people have misused God in general, and so now let's just go ahead and redefine God in our own terms.
Yeah, so it might be a little bit different. I think there is one core that, like, when you experience it the correct way, you experience it that way, but I think that...
But what's the correct way if it's all our own personal experience? There's no correct way.
You got me.
It wasn't a gotcha moment.
I don't know. I think that I'm very close to God, and I think I experience God, and to me, it's like, yeah, God won't shut up in my life. Like, it's
that's
all
awesome.
around
Yeah.
me. Yeah. So I don't really know. I think it's something you feel, and and maybe that goes back to your point where you say it's so individualized, and maybe that's not the best way. But
did Jesus reveal himself in name as a human being? Did God punch a hole through space and time to reveal himself as a person? It's kind of like Shakespeare and Hamlet. Did Shakespeare write himself into the play as Hamlet? And you can get to know Hamlet. Hamlet's a real person that Shakespeare is trying to reveal to us. Well, is that who Jesus is and was? And if not, if he just said, I'm a floating spirit or I'm a mushroom, many people believe Jesus was just a mushroom. Joe Rogan believed that for the longest time. So maybe he was. Or are the Gospels reliable historically? And were the Gospels, like so many of the great literary critics like C.S. Lewis talked about, they are written as nonfiction. If they were written as fiction, you could just say, well, it's written as fiction, make up Jesus, decide whoever Jesus is on your own terms, and it's your own experience. But I think the Gospels as historical documents and Jesus as a historical figure, who 98.9% of scholars believe across our nation was a historical figure, well, if he revealed himself in a certain way and said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to the Father except through me, I think the experience, like you said, is beautiful and very important, but now we have to contend with, well, is that true? Is he really who he said he was as the only way?
There's a lot of symbolism in the Bible, and it goes a lot deeper. Like, for example, you say he was nailed to the cross, right? I believe that, but I also believe maybe there is like a ecstasy around it, like Jesus was being nailed to us, opposed to just being nailed to the cross. That's why Jesus is within us.
Okay, so you believe, though, that there are different genres in the Bible. Apocalyptic literature, historical narrative, poetry, song.
A love story, for sure.
You're going to interpret based off of genre. You're not going to go look at apocalyptic literature and say, oh, this is historical narrative. So when the book of Revelation, for example, talks about this three-headed monster, well, you're not going to look at that and say, oh, there's a three-headed monster running around rampant the Roman Empire. No, there's more metaphor, there's more apocalyptic genre. But then you have Jesus being nailed to a cross. I mean, any historian worth his salt would say, yes, that actually happened. And that's one of the biggest defeaters against my Muslim friends. My Muslim friends would say, no, Jesus did not die on a cross. well, they're going to have to contend with the history and evidence behind he did die on a cross. So I don't know, that would be my pushback there. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Because if I'm just going to say, oh, it's all a metaphor, well, I'd better treat all my textbooks that way then. Science, as well as history here at this fine university. But I don't think you would do that, right? Or because you would fail in just about every class if you did.
I will say, I agree that it is historical, even though that's so contradicting. I want to believe,
How is it contradicting?
Because I'm over here saying that it's metaphors and it's symbolism, but I'm also like, it could be historical, so I am contradicting myself, but.
Well, I love that you take Jesus seriously. And the beauty about Christianity is you can get to know a person who claims to be God, who is, we believe is God, actually wanting a personal relationship with us. If you go to Hinduism, for example, there's going to be no personal relationship. There's definitely going to be no grace and forgiveness. And there's definitely not going to be an understanding of sin. There's always just going to be karma, and you messed up, and sorry, if you're dying of cancer right now, it was something you did in your previous life. But I think what Jesus says when it comes to grace and justice, yes, we mess up often, and oftentimes consequences follow, but there's also grace. And so, for me, I would just say, you're going to have to throw out the Bible if you're going to say, we can conceptualize Jesus any old way we want to.
You've always heard that, like, you know, God's creation, we are God's creation, and all of that. Well, if we are God's creation, why would God create you in a way where then he can turn back to you and say, well, you're sinning. Why are you doing this to me?
Great question. You and I are not robots. We're human beings and created in the image of God, which partially means we have a free will, which means I can pull out my wallet if this guy's hungry. Aren't you so glad you sat here today? Oh, yeah. Yeah, oh yeah. And I can give him my wallet and tell him go out and get dinner. Or I can take my hand that God has given me, and instead of pulling out money to give it to him, I can roll it into a fist and send it crashing into his handsome face. God makes me do neither, but he will judge me if I choose to roll my hand into a fist and send it crashing into his handsome face, because that is a perversion of the gift of a hand that God gave me, in stark contrast to pulling out of my wallet to give him money because he's hungry. That is good. Smacking him is evil. So God chose to partially limit his power by giving me a free will, which means if I choose to haul back and slam him in the face, he's not going to put plexiglass right here, and my hand is going to reverberate and recoil after I hit the plexiglass. But there's coming a day of judgment when God will hold me responsible for the way I exercise my free will.
It does make sense, because I've heard people, like, you know, tell me, oh, well, you know, we're not, you know, under the total influence of God, and we still have, like, freedom per se. But I just always wondered, like, you know, so, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, did he give us that freedom knowing we would sin? And basically, like, yeah, that's basically my question. Or did he expect us to, like, just be completely, like, sinless?
No, he gives us a free will, calls us to be responsible. I've been irresponsible. That is my sin. My sin is, I think I got a better way to be happy. I think I got a better way to live my life than God's way. In other words, God, in spite of the fact that you're all-knowing and all-loving, I got a better way. I think I know what's best for Cliff. And God says, whoa, slow down, Cliff. I'm all-knowing and I'm all-loving. You can trust me. And now I got to make a decision. Am I going to trust God? Or am I going to trust Cliff ultimately to define right and wrong, to define the purpose of my sexuality, to define the purpose of my money? Every area of life. Does God know better than I do, or do I know better than God? In many ways, it just comes down to that simple statement. Do I know better than God, or does God know better than me the best way to be happy, to be fulfilled, to be satisfied in life? And I think, especially when I'm in university, around the tender ages of 18 to 23, that having sex with anybody who wants to have sex with me, consensual sex, is by far the best way to be happy. And Jesus Christ says, no, Cliff, you're wrong. Because when you have sex outside of the context of a lifelong commitment, You're trivializing yourself, and you're trivializing your sex partner. And guess what, Cliff? A woman is not just a good-looking pair of legs. A woman is not a 10 or an 8 or a 6 or a 2. No, that is a totally false view of womanhood. A woman is a precious human being created in the image of God, which means you better learn to respect her, Cliff, as a woman, not as a hunk of meat on a hoof.
Another thing I've been thinking about is like, well, in that process, how do you prevent yourself from, falling into a trap of the Bible or the Word of God being weaponized against society? Because we saw it in your early European history with the mandate of heaven, and even with the United States with Manifest Destiny.
Yep.
Like they had a mandate from heaven to do this. When in reality, like, how does that make sense?
Sir, the answer to your question is so simple, but it's very disturbing. I can't answer your question. You got to go do your homework. You got to read the Bible for yourselves, because you're absolutely correct. People are going to use the Bible to weaponize their opinion and to slam you into the ground. And that's tragic. That is evil, it's wrong, but you're right, sir. It's been done for thousands of years. Don't buy into it. Instead, read the Bible for yourself. Ask God to give you wisdom. Apply the scriptures to your life, and don't use it as a weapon, because that has been done, and it's sick and tragic. But remember, nuclear energy has been used to blow Hiroshima and Nagasaki off the map. It doesn't mean that nuclear energy is all bad, just because it's abused. And there's a lot of stuff that's been abused. That doesn't mean it's wrong. Drugs. There's some bad drugs. You can get hooked and become an addict. Or there's some use of good drugs, where a doctor will medicate you and you will be a lot healthier as a result of drugs. So don't get turned off by religious hypocrisy. Reject it. Reject it when people weaponize their faith and use it to justify slamming people in the ground. That's evil, flat out. And Christ attacked those people in the Gospels. You're a delight to talk to. I like the way you think.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it so much.
Wait, just 1 second. Stuart, what do you have to say to this gentleman?
I buttered my bread yesterday, stuck it in the toaster. I could have used that butter knife to have stuck it in my dad, or he could have stuck it in me. Depends where we're at in our relationship. No, but you get my point. I mean, a butter knife is meant to butter bread, and if it's not, then it's being abused for its purpose, as well as Beethoven, very gifted, and if you play Beethoven poorly, doesn't make Beethoven somehow a horrible artist. Just like Jesus Christ. And what I find so interesting is Jesus came with the towel more than any other spiritual leader, not even close. Jesus came with self-sacrifice, not self-assertion. In our culture today, it's about your life for mine. Jesus says it's my life for yours. And that has shaped Judeo-Christian values down through our nation's history. The scary part is that's kind of being taken away. The revival that I see with your guys' generation, fortunately, is bringing it back. But if you remove Judeo-Christian values based off of the spiritual leader who brought the towel, now all of a sudden you're going to see forgiveness disappear. We talked about sin. You're going to see sin disappear. You're going to see commitment. See, to your sexual question earlier, the thing I see in my town that's concerning to me is open marriages and key parties. Been invited before. I said no. And I think that's very important for people to say no. Because some people think it's just spicing up the marriage. No, it's communicating to your children that you could care less about your spouse and commitment. But Jesus Christ came, unlike any other spiritual leader, and said there's something called a covenant that you strike with a spouse where you say, till death do us part. And this is before God. And so you lose the moral bearings of our society when the church loses its moral authority done right through Jesus' teachings and who he was. The church done right was in the Roman Empire, when all the big plagues hit in the 300s and 400s AD, the Christians were the only ones who were leaving these suburban areas, going down into the urban areas, giving up their own lives because they caught the plague themselves, trying to bring others out of the cities to the suburbs to save their lives. Okay, that's what Christ taught, all about sacrifice. So whenever you see any type of abuse in the name of Christ, you just got to call it what it is. But if there wasn't this Jesus Christ who existed, who all of a sudden made it cool to be kind and self-sacrificial, I don't know where we'd be as a society or as a world.
My general question is, what to you guys is the difference between indoctrination and education? Because I believe that the people that come to religion on their own are the people that most enjoy it and use it for the most good, and that forcing it on people can either hurt them or they will use it for bad purposes. And teaching it to children who cannot intellectually defend themselves and have no world experience is, I think, a big problem. And it is an interesting one. There's the example that Richard Dawkins uses of there's no such thing as a Marxist child or a capitalist child, right? They don't understand those things. And yeah, like one of my extreme views is that I don't think that anybody under the age of 18 should be allowed in any religious building.
Do you think kids are getting indoctrinated in public schools around here right now?
No.
They're just getting educated?
That's education, yes.
Really?
Yes.
You sure?
Yes.
Have you talked to their parents?
I was wondering what your answer is.
I would talk to their parents. They're getting more indoctrinated now than ever in the area of you can only be transparent with guidance counselors at their school, and the guidance counselors have had the parents sign certain documents where they're not even going to share things with the parents when the kids are only 7 years old. I mean, talk about indoctrination. Holy smokes, the level of dogmatism couldn't be any higher in our public schools.
Right, I'm a big believer in that. I mean, we don't let parents physically abuse their children. We do draw lines of what parents, they're not just like, all right, that's your kid, you can do whatever. And I'm a big believer in that society is required to look after everybody. And if that child wants to, like, I do want to withhold some things from my parent, I think they have the right to do that. Yeah.
So based off of the latest Harvard and Dartmouth studies, if you are going to church on a weekly basis, you grow greatly in your happiness and fulfillment in your 20s and 30s. Your depression chances drop significantly, anxiety drops significantly, drug abuse drops significantly, you become a much greater giver to your community. So why wouldn't you, if you don't take your kids to church, then you're abusing them.
There's the counter argument of that is looking at all the people that have had their lives really messed up from religion and had bad experiences, and the huge amounts of, just gay people or like throughout history, the people that have been targeted and religion being weaponized against them.
Mao Zedong, over 110 million. Hitler, over 6 million. Pol Pot, 4 million.
Were they killing
we just keep
atheism?
One warden who said, in the name of the God that does not exist, thank you that you do not exist so that I can do to this prisoner whatever I want to do. So Stalin, absolutely. These were atheistic regimes that were set up. There were communistic regimes as well, where there was zero God involved. Zero. And that's why morally they could do whatever they wanted to anybody and slaughter them. Makes a lot of sense.
We're kind of away from the topic. Could we get back to what's the difference?
No, it's not away from the topic at all, because you were saying dogmatism and the way all these kids are abused in the Christian church, and I just flipped it right on you, and you had a tough time answering it. Look at Rodney Stark. He's an atheist sociologist. He passed away recently. He himself did all these studies. So I'm getting this from an atheist, not a Christian. I'm not quoting Christian sources here. This is a serious thing. And so to say that Christians somehow are indoctrinating more so than atheists or doing more damage to kids than atheists is just simply not true. That is your worldview backed by zero science or studies behind it. I took your point and basically took it to an extreme. What specifically, though, are you getting at? That you want? What does education look like? See, because I think the two are so close. Like him taking me to church on every Sunday, strongly encouraging me, is that indoctrination or is that education?
I believe that is indoctrination. For me, the difference between indoctrination is something that is forceful and has punishments attached to it, and is a biased form of education where you are, I mean, he wasn't taking you one day to a church and then to a mosque and then to a synagogue, right? It is presenting one side of the story and presenting it as this is the only truth, and if you don't follow it, there's punishments, right? That does not go on in public schools.
No,
I was waiting.
he did not spank me and say, you better go to church with tears in your eyes and feeling like you're abused. No, see, our society today defines freedom exactly like you're defining it right now. No guardrails. And let's just pretend like you can do anything you want. That's called negative freedom. So for example, if you go home, let's say 30 years from now, and you just start eating pints and pints of ice cream, and that's freedom, right? Eat whatever you want. Well, you're not gonna see your grandkids or kids for very long because you're gonna pass away. It's negative freedom. Positive freedom says there needs to be guardrails. There needs to be restraints in life. You cannot go against the fabric of the universe that God created, or you're gonna end up completely demised fairly quickly. So to say that he indoctrinated me is quite comical, because very early in my life was he saying, all right, do you want to believe this or do you not want to believe this? You better ask these big questions. And especially when you hit high school, when you have the ability to really think for yourself, you better be looking at all the worldviews. And so never did he force me to go to church, never did he force me to go a certain way, and he always opened the door for, you better ask any type of question you want.
And on the morality side of things and the community side of things, there are ways that, I mean, yes, it absolutely gives you community, and there are, you know, it is a form of morality, but...
Well, he made me go to school. That's indoctrination. He made me go to school every single day. That was abuse.
Well, not only that, 75% of preachers' kids do not believe in Jesus. What are you going to do with that? You still going to hide behind, oh, Christians are into indoctrination? 75% of ministers' kids do not follow Jesus Christ. Well, obviously, it knocks your whole theory right into the garbage can.
I was asking you what the difference between indoctrination...
No, you went further than that. That's where you started. But then you went further and said, and Christians indoctrinate people and all that kind of stuff. And that's what came out.
They weren't like successful in the indoctrination doesn't mean that it's not indoctrination.
Oh. If 75% of preachers' kids, ministers' kids don't believe in Christ anymore, mom and dad did a horrible indoctrination. Because when you start talking to preachers' kids, inevitably the reason they walked away from Christ is dad and mom were too busy with the people of their church, didn't give them much time, which is what I had to fight to make sure I was a coach, went to his games, supported him, loved him across the board. He needed to understand he's going to play what sport he wants to play. He's going to go to church, but he can believe whatever he wants to believe. I'm not going to force him to believe something, but yes, I'm going to teach him. And if you have a doctor who's aware of the fact that you are a woman who's never had a mammogram, if the doctor doesn't tell you, you need to go and get a mammogram, ma'am, because breast cancer is lethal, he doesn't give a rip about that woman. So be careful the way you slip into indoctrination. Are there some examples of indoctrination in the Christian church? Absolutely yes. But sir, today, Christians indoctrinating, meaning by that forcing their kids to do something? Absolutely no way. I have never bumped into that. And I'm on the lookout for it, believe me. And that's baloney. To brainwash somebody? I assume that what you mean when you say indoctrination with such a negative connotation is you're accusing them of brainwashing. No. I have never met any Christian parents who brainwash their kids.
And it's a fallacy, too. It's totally inconsistent. One of my best friends in college, who's a strong Christian, said that his atheist parents said, absolutely no, you are not going anywhere Sunday morning. You are staying at home. Is that indoctrinating? He wasn't allowed to explore different worldviews like Christianity.
Yes.
Okay, good. So atheists indoctrinate just as much as Christians.
No.
Yeah, okay, that's a bald assertion. Bald assertion. What is the evidence? Absolutely no is not an argument. It's not an argument. What? That's an emotional bias. What is the evidence then?
No, you said that like the amount of Christians and atheists that indoctrinate, but there's like what 10 times more Christians in America, and I would love to see
percentage within the control group. Absolute 110%. Atheists do not take their kids to church. That's a form of indoctrination as well. Just because somebody takes their kids to church and says, hey, we're going to church today, just like you're going to go to school during the week. A lot of parents just take their kids to church just so they can have a moral foundation of ethics. Just like school, you're going to learn in order to actually have a healthy career and make money. Very similar, they say. And then you got the atheists here on a Sunday morning saying, no, we're not going to do that. That's not being more of a free thinker, my friend. You can be a free thinker in each circle. Atheists are not just the free thinking ones. I'm sorry. The majority of atheists, unfortunately, are very closed off in their thinking. They claim to be free thinkers, and I'm very open to the evidence, but the vast majority of them that we meet, and you've been doing it for 47 years, they are very closed off. And that's why I like the kid before you who was an atheist, and he was quite open, very open to different worldviews, and said, I don't know at the end of the day. And so I would urge you to have the same type of perspective. Just because there's some abuse in the church, just because there's some abuse in atheistic regimes, does not mean it's untrue. Just because Beethoven was such a fantastic musician, and I play Beethoven very poorly, I am not musically gifted, does not mean that that's a reflection on Beethoven himself. Beethoven is still a great musician.
I'd like to end with religions being different TVs, right? And there are different channels on TV, and that atheism, which you're claiming it's also like restricting somebody and putting them down a tunnel, is the equivalent of turning that TV off and letting them, explore to go to one of those things, or to fill that zone with other types of philosophy or ways of thinking, and appreciating their world and understanding their world. Yeah.
But there is an unfortunate historical fact. Jesus lived a sinless life, died on a cross for forgiving his enemies, and rose from the dead. And Jesus Christ has led the charge for respecting women, respecting people of all races, because we're all created in the image of God. He has led that charge. There's nobody who's impacted this world when it comes to racial equality, gender equality, more than Jesus Christ. But let's talk about an historical fact. You put Mao Zedong, Joseph Stalin, and Adolf Hitler together, and their worldview, their philosophy of life, was perfectly justified in what they did, slaughtering millions of people. When Christians murder people, that is hypocrisy. That is wrong. It's a violation of what Jesus taught. When an atheist slaughters people, that is not a violation of their moral relativism. That is not a violation of their nihilism. And don't take it from me, read Friedrich Nietzsche, Albert Camus, Jean-Paul Sartre. It's real clear, intellectually consistent. No God, morality is relative. You can love people, you can murder them. It's all relative. You follow Jesus Christ and you're a hypocrite, you murder, you hate people, you're racist, you're a flaming phony. Flat out. That's all I'm saying.
No, I would agree with that.
So if morality is not objective, you have wiped out the basis of critiquing Stalin, Hitler, because it's all relative. So you take your little cultural prejudices and get out. Mao Zedong was Chinese. Different culture. You have no business telling him from your culture, Mao Zedong, that was wrong what you did. You're a different culture from Adolf Hitler. You have no basis for telling a Nazi German slaughtering Jews in Dachau and Auschwitz is wrong.
Morality is not objective, but it can be reasoned and logically came to through like philosophy, like John Rawls' theory of justice.
You bet.
And there are people that yes, I can critique those people.
The only problem is Stalin had his reasons, Hitler had his reasons.
And I'm an arrogant twit if I say, my reasoning is right and your reasoning is wrong. What you have is, you hold on to truth. And you say, with my mind, I'm getting in touch with truth, Hitler. I'm getting in touch with truth, Mao Zedong. If you're a consistent atheist, you know truth does not exist. Truth is just something you perceive with your own bias, with your own cultural prejudice. Come on, man, what's ethnocentrism? Certainly you guys are being taught about the evils of ethnocentrism here at the University of Oregon. It's thinking that your culture is right and other cultures are wrong. Where on earth do you get off critiquing other cultures? It's all relative, man. And if one culture wants to say slaughtering Jews is good, that's their culture. And if Mao Zedong, with his culture, wants to say slaughtering people is good, for him it's good. But if I'm a follower of Christ and I say slaughtering Jews is good, I'm a hypocrite because I'm contradicting Jesus Christ. I'm contradicting the good character of God. And that's why I respect Nietzsche, Camus, and Sartre, because they had the honesty to take their atheism seriously, and they said, it's all a cosmic crapshoot. You define it your way, I define it my way. I'm not right, you're not wrong. You're not right, I'm not wrong. It's all relative, man. You can't live that out, and I'm glad you don't, sir. You know very well that you as an atheist have a conscience that tells you, no, 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 no. Although I might say with the top of my head, morality's relative, don't you go around slaughtering Jews, Hitler, because that's really objectively wrong. But you're an intellectual hypocrite. You're living your life as if, oh no, baby, you gas Jews, that ain't relatively wrong, that is absolutely wrong.
Are there rules to like objective rules created by somebody else? No, but humans, it is objectively wrong if I wanted people to not kill me to go kill people, right? That's the golden rule. The golden rule is a great example of logic being able to work its way and for something to be objective.
Oh,
right?
I disagree totally. You scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. Makes some sense. You stick the knife in my back, I scratch your back and help you? That's stupid. That's what Jesus taught. Jesus taught not just you scratch my back and then, baby, tit for tat, I'll scratch your back. You help me and then I got a reason to help you. Jesus said, the guy who sticks the knife in your back, you go out and help him. You love your enemy. That, sir, is stupid. It is illogical if we live in a dog-eat-dog world. But if there is a God who is love at the center of the cosmos, then it's stupid not to love your enemy. Because your enemy is still a human being created in the image of God. And that's what my lesbian friends at Texas State couldn't understand. When they said to me, Cliff, you said you got racist friends? You're an idiot. You have friends who are racist? And I said, yes, ma'am. But they're still human beings created in the image of God. And they still have value. I deplore their racism, but I love them and respect them as human beings created in the image of God.
Violence is a cycle, and if we keep on breaking it and breaking it and breaking it, at some point we have to find within ourselves to say, continuing this cycle of violence only leads to more violence, and we need to stop it, right? I mean, you look at the historical things of Ireland and like any world conflict, right? To some extent, you have to say, all right, we're going to be the bigger person and not do this in order to end the cycle of violence for all human good.
No, buddy, I appreciate your altruism.
Right, and
we're going to be bigger people.
If somebody stabs me and I stab him back, then I get stabbed back again, right? Like,
I could give a rip about the cycle.
So
I care about my family. You stick him or you stick me, I'm coming after you, bud, to teach you don't do that ever again. If you do, I'm going to knife you.
A contradiction to what you just said Jesus wants you to do.
Thank you. I'm jumping into your worldview. And if your worldview is morality's relative, I am not going to love my enemy. I'm not going to love the guy who sticks in with a knife. If morality's relative and it's all a crapshoot, you stick him with a knife, I'm coming after you, bud.
Okay.
Because you better not stick him again.
Why? I don't believe that, but okay.
And you have no basis for it. I asked you why, and you have no basis.
Well, no, you should be.
And don't take it from me. Take it from Nietzsche, Camus, Sartre. Don't take it from me. Take it from all the nihilists. It's exactly what they pointed out. Camus begins the book, L'étranger, the stranger, with the words of a young teenage boy who says, Yesterday, mother died. Or was it today? Who gives a rip when mom died? Life is absurd. Death ends the absurdity that birth began. That's consistent atheism. That's Albert Camus. He was brilliant. But you can't live it out.
And just to let you know, from that evolutionary morality perspective, you should be a fascist. You should be a fascist because from the evolutionary perspective, strong eat the weak. Eventually you start to group up in a clan, and in order to survive, you stick with your clan. You just said something where everybody notices violence, and so cross-culturally, everybody should get together and say, hey, we gotta figure out how to heal this violence. There's not a shred of evidence for that from moral theory. From an evolutionary perspective, it's the strong eat the weak, so you should always try and preserve your gene pool and just yours alone with your group. So I'm just trying to completely debunk everything you said about moral theory right there. Because morality that we get from God is not just this guy in the sky who's somehow writing all the rules. No, it's a moral transcendent source. There's a law above the law. That's why we can seek after peace and reconciliation and fight against racism. Because it's not about the law that comes just from culture.
Just
there's a
read
law
the
above
letter
the
from
law.
the Birmingham jail. The white ministers of Birmingham, Alabama were telling, shut up, black boy. Shut up, Dr. Martin Luther King. The great state of Alabama has decreed that segregation is good. And from his prison cell, Dr. Martin Luther King writes, guess what, guys? There's a law above the law of the great state of Alabama, and according to that law, segregation and racism are wrong. Bravo, Dr. Martin Luther King. That is exactly right. Intellectually consistent. There's a law above the law of the great state of Alabama. No king. If there's no God, there's no law above the law of the state you live in. But King said, garbage. King said, you've got a conscience and you understand that there is a law above the law of the state of Alabama. And according to that law, segregation is evil.
From your perspective, that makes sense.
No. From your perspective, does that make sense or not?
I mean, I think that there are, I mean, as Martin Luther King said, that there's a moral imperative to not follow unjust laws, right? And I do not believe, though, that God is the only way to find a theory of justice. Like I just said, John Rawls and plenty of others, political and social theorists have come up with ways with the absence of God.
All right, but what are they? You talked about how Christians are closed-off thinkers and that atheists are wide open in their thinking and their truth-seeking. You keep dropping John Rawls. Now I want to hear, what is his perspective and how do we get to this place of justice without God?
His view is that he talks a lot about the veil of ignorance of you not knowing where you will be in a certain situation, right? Like if I'm gonna break a cookie in two, right? We're gonna split a cookie and I break it in two, and I break it, but you choose a piece, right? It would be foolish of me to break one piece big and one piece small, right? Those are the types of logical things that you can just come to without God.
Okay.
That can then build a society of what we want.
Yep, no, I know, yeah, I know.
If, right, the society in Martin Luther King today was like, all right, there's going to be one group that has all access to everything, and there's going to be one group that has no access to anything, right, the whites and the blacks, right, that does not make sense logically.
You get there with reason. You get there with reason. Okay, I want you to read the Shuntong Compound. A secularist from Harvard was in the Shuntong Compound, and he said, in this prisoner of war camp, we are going to be reasoned based off of Rawls. We are going to be able to reason ourselves to the point of saying, hey, your bunk over here only has 2 beds. We over here have 3, and there's more prisoners coming in. So why don't we share our portions, our rations with you, maybe even give you a bed, because we're rational human beings, where we're just going to say morally and ethically, we should be equal. Okay, this Harvard atheist, I love that he writes, another book would be Tim Keller's Making Sense of God. He writes in there, and he talks about how I thought by Rawls' perspective, we could be reasonable human beings and say, hey, break off half that cookie for you and I'll keep half. Doesn't that make sense? But he says as soon as the pressure picks up, it's impossible to live out that moral theory. Impossible. But Jesus Christ steps in and he says, no, morally, we are all created in God's image. We are all equal. Jesus Christ says, stick your neck out on the line for the other. Don't save your own skin. Love the other. That's why there was a man in that camp named Eric Liddell, who was an Olympian, who lived out the Christian moral ethic because he was devoted to Christ. And he was the only one in that camp, this secularist talks about, who has joy, happiness, and peace. And he was the only one sacrificing for others, not because of reason, sharing half a cookie with another half a cookie. You and I get both half cookies. No, he said that would not work. And sure enough, it didn't work. It never does. So you need to understand, why do you live for things like human rights? You seem like a compassionate guy, loving guy. Why? Why are you like that? And it's because you're swimming in the pond of Judeo-Christian values set by Jesus Christ.
But Christianity does this all the time of like, yes, there are good things that you draw from it, and I agree with all the things you just said, but then you say this is the only way that we can come to these things, and it's like
No, that's not what we said.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
You've totally misunderstood the past half hour. Never once did he say, never once did I say, if you're an atheist, you can't understand justice. What I am saying is, all of my please listen, all of my atheist friends understand justice. All of my atheist friends are very good people. They do a lot of good. But the problem is, they have wiped out the foundation of goodness, the foundation of justice. Because when you wipe out God, you're wiping out the mind prior to the human mind, who creates and defines justice, who creates people with innate value, which means you're just floating through the air on this stuff. As Stuart said, you're living off the fumes of the Judeo-Christian worldview, because your worldview says there is no God. Now, if there is no God, why is justice not a real value? Because this thing and that column have no understanding of justice, right and wrong. It takes a mind, a thinking mind, to understand justice, love, forgiveness. If there is no God, there is no mind prior to the human mind, which means it's obviously the human mind that creates justice, love, whatever. But if you're going to be consistent and there is no God, you're going to have to say, so good and evil and injustice are just the creation of the human mind. So that mind has one definition, that one mind has another definition, that mind has another definition. This guy says, I'm more rational than you are, so my definition is correct. You say, I'm a more heartfelt, loving guy, so my definition is correct. And he says, I'm more into punish the wicked, and my definition is correct. Nobody's right, nobody's wrong, because it's just the creation of the human mind. So if he's got his definition, who am I to tell him he's wrong? I'm just another human being. And what's really sick is if I say, oh no, my culture's right and your culture's wrong. Baloney. That's arrogance. So you see why Jesus Christ makes so much sense, because he is the foundation, God is the foundation of justice, goodness, love, compassion. These are real values. They're not made up by the Republicans. They're not made up by the Democrats. They're not made up by the Americans. They're not made up by the Nazis. They're made up by God, and he's given us consciences and rational minds that we can understand. And every one of my atheist friends, I'm going to say it so you don't misquote me, please. Every one of my atheist friends does a lot of good. Every one of my atheist friends is very loving. But what they have wiped out is the foundation of that love, of that justice, which is God. Thank you so much.
So I grew up Catholic and I'm leaning towards Christian faith, but going to Catholic church, you always see the crucifix, and I've been told it's wrong to make Jesus an image. But I see a lot of images of Jesus, and I've been told it's wrong, and I've been told it's right. So I'm just confused, and I want to know your perspective on that.
What's the number one most recognized symbol worldwide? Now, if it was an electric chair, hanging around somebody's neck? Would it hold the same worth and value? No, I don't believe so, unless that person didn't just die for you, but died for the entire world, sins of the whole world. And so I think it's interesting where if it's a remembrance of what Jesus did for us, and that ultimately he defeated sin and will defeat death at the end of time, then I'm all about it. If it just becomes a ritualistic thing like I see MLB players do in the outfield right before the first pitch, where it's kissing the cross and that sort of thing, that's not sinful, but it sort of empties the cross of its power in some ways. Remember, we get the word groan from those who were carrying their crosses in the streets, who the Romans were making them carry those crosses to their destinations of when they would hang on those very crosses. And it was known, you could hear throughout the entire city, men, women groaning on crosses. I mean, it was loud, louder than you can imagine. Thank you, Dan. Louder than you can imagine in terms of the pain of it all. So I would just say the cross is obviously the central piece of our entire Christian faith. Take it very seriously, and don't take it ritualistically or somehow it's like it's just a good luck charm. But also look to it as, yes, it's death and pain. Jesus was a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief and pain, and yet he points to the greatest eternity imaginable, where every single tear will be wiped away from every eye.
Grapple with the changes over time with translation and how the Bible is sometimes moved to serve our purpose more than the original intent.
I have very few struggles with the reliability of the Gospels because the Gospels in English today are based on over 5,800 Greek manuscripts or pieces of manuscript dated from the 1st to the 10th century, all agreeing to an infinitesimal degree. The manuscript wealth is incredible. Then you've got 10,000 Latin Vulgate manuscripts, all agreeing to an infinitesimal degree. And you've got 9,300 manuscripts in Syriac, Slavic, Gothic, Ethiopic, Coptic, and Armenian. So you've got about 25,000 manuscripts. Are there discrepancies between the manuscripts? Yes, sir, there are. But they are so small, they're so insignificant, they don't change anything of any importance. So I'm not so concerned about the reliability of the Gospels of the New Testament. I am deeply concerned about the misinterpretations of the New Testament. You know, Jesus the Republican. No. He did not start the Republican Party. No, Jesus the Democrat. No, Jesus did not start the Democratic Party. You know the Jesus who was wrapped in an American flag and laid in a manger. No, he was not wrapped in an American flag to be laid in a manger. He was wrapped in swaddling clothes. You know Jesus the blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy who asserted white supremacy. False. Totally lying. Deception. Jesus was a Jew. Jesus is for all races. Let me ask you, what's the demographic in the world that has the highest percentage of Christians? Women of color. And in the United States, what's the demographic with the highest percentage? African American women. Okay, so around the world, those dumb women believe in Jesus, who was a sexist pig. Baloney, you're so insulting, it's incredible. Jesus elevated the role of women. Oh, you know, the racist Jesus, he's the one that, I'm struggling with. No. Jesus did not have a racist bone in his body. In his first sermon in Luke chapter 4, he made a direct frontal attack on racism, and he told a synagogue filled with Jews, hey, guess what, guys? God loves Gentiles just as much as he loved Jews. And they were irate, and they grabbed him, and they bring him to a cliff to throw him to his death. For anybody to think that Jesus justified sexism or racism, they're misinterpreting the text in a very grievous way. So, yes, sir, I'm deeply concerned about the misinterpretations of the New Testament. Then we'll go a little further. I have to debate religion professors. If I want a good debate on a campus, I don't go to the science department, I go to the religion department. Why? Because the majority of the religion professors have knocked the supernatural out of the Gospels. They say, you can't expect educated 21st century students to believe that Jesus actually walked on water. No, he just knew where the stones were. He just went from stone to stone to stone. Baloney. He walked on water. Why? Because he's a supernatural God revealing himself in human form. And he didn't just spiritually rise from the dead, he bodily, physically rose from the dead, and over a period of 40 days, he appeared to over 500 people. So yes, I'm very concerned about the misinterpretation of the Bible. Stuart, what do you think?
But this is why I'm so thankful for something called textual criticism. Not to insult any other religions, but I'm thinking specifically of one, I'm not going to say the name, that has really just one earliest manuscript. And so you can't do textual criticism on one manuscript. What is textual criticism? It's taking endless amounts of manuscripts that you have. So for example, for the Gospels, we have over 5,000, closer to 6,000. And if you look at other languages, over 25,000. And you're saying, okay, based off of these different manuscripts, how can we get back closest to what the original manuscript wanted to communicate? But other religions, again, will only have one or will only have 15. Very hard to get back to original audience, authorship, and what really took place. But the Gospels are unlike any other faith proclamation through oral testimony first and then the written word second. We have so many manuscripts. This is a crazy study. We have this many manuscripts for the Gospels. If you were to pile all of them up together, it would be 3.5 Empire State Buildings high. So we're near the great Empire State Building back in New York City. Let me just tell you right now, if you haven't seen the Empire State Building, that is very high. Versus all other ancient manuscripts from that time period, about 4 feet high. Okay, that's a lot of dissecting you can do, scholars can do, to look at, all right, who were they writing to and who ultimately did they have in mind when they were writing? And so remember, the Bible is not written to us, it's written for us. So not to us, it's written to whether Palestinians, whether even Babylonians were around, different people groups at different time periods. So we got to be very careful not just to read a Bible verse. You have to read numerous Bible verses to get ultimately the context and the real message. But know that it's written for you in the sense of it's God inspired and he is trying to tell you something. It's really his ultimate love letter for us.
How can men and women headed into the ministry field practice spiritual discipline better and find the motivation to keep that spiritual discipline?
Hey man, would you please believe in this pink elephant right here on my left hand? My pink elephant friend right here, the one right here, this pink elephant gives my life meaning, purpose, direction, hope, and joy. So I hope you'll come to believe in this pink elephant. Why can you not believe in the pink elephant on my left hand? Because there is no evidence to support it. If I offer you $1 million to believe in the pink elephant right here on my left hand, you might, because you want the $1 million, say, oh yeah, Cliff, I believe in the pink elephant. But you know you're lying. Your mind will not allow you to believe in the pink elephant on the left hand. Now, the truth of Christ is crucial. The historical evidence of the way he lived, taught, died, and rose from the dead is he is totally credible, totally trustworthy. He is the truth. And now hopefully both his love and his truth are going to motivate you and me all life long to serve him, be we an electrical engineer, and a police officer, a civil engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, a plumber, a carpenter, a homemaker, it doesn't matter, an athlete, a student, whatever. That's the motive for a follower of Christ, to love Christ and to embrace him as the truth. And those two things are to motivate us. Now, how do you grow spiritually? First of all, by practice. Come on, guys. University of Georgia doesn't have the football team they have because guys don't practice. You know very well if you want to win football games, you better do all the dirt drills and you better practice. And you know very well if you want to go on to grad school, you're going to practice your studies. You're not going to party. You're going to study. You practice in order to grow intellectually. And you know very well if you're into dance, art, music, you're going to practice. Otherwise, you're going to flunk. The same thing is true with faith. It's no different. You got to practice the faith. Why? Because it's real easy for me to say, you know, this guy is sitting here and this woman is sitting here because I can see them. I can touch them. I can't see God, I can't touch God, and I don't audibly hear God's voice.
So this whole issue of the spiritual realm gets incredibly difficult for me, a very physical guy, to grasp. And that is why I've got to begin to think about the evidence for God, the evidence for a spirit, and it's real simple. Everybody at University of Georgia is concerned about human value, meaning and purpose in life, ethics, how to live your life, right and wrong, good and evil, and maybe life after death. Does it exist or not? Well, guess what, guys? All four of those issues, which are fundamental to your life and to my life, are spiritual issues. Because guess what, guys? If there is no God, there's no innate human value. We're all just good-looking monkeys evolved to a higher order. If there is no God, there's no meaning and purpose to life except the one that I create. And if I create the meaning of my life to be nice to this guy today, but if tomorrow my meaning is to hurt him, I'm not wrong, I'm not right. Because it's me who creates my own meaning. And if I create my meaning today to be to love you, great. But if I create my meaning tomorrow to hate you, I'm not wrong. I just have changed my mind. My feelings are different. And that's all meaning is, a feeling. No, if there is a God, it's possible that there was a real meaning and purpose to your life. And ethics, if there is no God, morality is a crapshoot. It's ultimately relative. And fourthly, obviously, if there is no God, there's no life after death. Give me a break. When you die, you rot. When I die, I rot. I've never met a guy alive after he's died. But if Jesus Christ rose from the dead, and if there is a supernatural God, then it's not irrational to believe there's life after death. That's all spiritual stuff. So you see, every person at the University of Georgia has this spiritual longing to know God. Now we run away from it, we disguise it at times, we call ourselves agnostic, I don't know, or atheist, I do know there is no God. But that's a game. That's a cheap game. Why? Because the universe is not religiously ambiguous. And the only reason an atheist doesn't find God, and the only reason an agnostic does not find God, is for the same reason that a criminal does not find the police. He's running away. So in order to grow spiritually, you've got to practice the spiritual disciplines. Meditation, prayer, Bible reading, solitude, and simplicity, which is the opposite of the great American materialistic dream. Simplicity, solitude, celebrating God, His goodness, sharing your faith. It's in sharing my faith. That is part of me growing spiritually. And in serving others, in justice, standing for justice and truth, and in learning how to deal with suffering. Guys, if you haven't suffered a lot yet, I don't mean to break it to you, but you will suffer. There is no single human being who escapes suffering. Now, how are you going to deal with suffering? You can get angry, you can get bitter, you can wave your fist in God's face. That's misplaced anger, guys. Life is unfair, God is fair. Now, how do you deal with suffering? When you learn to trust God in suffering, when you learn to read the Negro spirituals and see how African American slaves dealt with suffering in an amazing way, then you begin to grow spiritually. Because be you having a comfortable life, a cushy life, or be you having a life filled with suffering, you know that God is good. You know that God is great. And therefore you're going to trust Him, not some alternative.
So I joined the military a couple years ago as an infantryman.
Thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you. And so I kind of asked how, so our main objective is to close in and destroy Yemen. And I was kind of wondering how that contradicts Christianity and just the rules of God.
Followers of Christ disagree. Some followers of Christ are pacifists. An excellent example of that is one of the most conservative groups of Christians in America, the Amish. The Amish are total pacifists. No police officer is going to carry a gun in this community, and we do not support military. Why? Because we take the teaching of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to them the other also. And we apply it to civil morality, no violence, force of any kind. Other followers of Christ, myself included, emphasize the fact that we are all sinful human beings, and in Romans chapter 13, the Apostle Paul writes that the government does not bear the sword in vain. I would argue that if you and I go into a restaurant here in San Marcos, and while we're in there, a guy takes out a gun and starts blowing people away. If you hit the guy high and I hit him low and we break his neck in the process, that's not murder. That's killing motivated to protect the innocent from being slaughtered. And I would argue that that is an ethical decision. But remember, both sides are based on a couple of points. First point, all human life is valuable because God created us in his image. And so every single human being has innate value. But let's also be honest, if there is no God, there's no basis for human value. If there is no God, I'm valuable because my culture tells me I'm valuable. I'm valuable because I tell myself I'm valuable. And if I'm not doing a very good job convincing myself that I'm valuable, then I feel like a piece of dirt. And if I happen to live in a culture that says, well, Cliff, your skin color is the wrong color, and you're not very smart, your GPA is not high enough, so too bad, you're a loser, well, then that's what I am, a loser. And according to Jesus Christ, there's no human being who's a loser. According to Christ, we all have equal value and dignity because our value and dignity has nothing to do with what culture says, has nothing to do with what we say. It has everything to do with what God says. And he says, I made you in my image to reflect my character. That's what it means. To be created in the image or likeness of God means I was created to reflect the goodness, the love, the justice, the kindness of Almighty God.
So when I was in basic training, it's kind of it just felt absent. So everybody's kind of saying that it's unforgivable. So they just refuse to believe in a religion or Christianity or anything like that.
Okay, now you see, what Christ calls you to do is think through the issues carefully. Why are you concerned that murder might be wrong? I would argue you're concerned that murder or killing someone as a military figure is wrong because it's the ending of a human life. Okay, but then the obvious next question is, well, why is human life valuable? You see, sir, if there is no God, human life is a crapshoot. Human life is ultimately insignificant, except in the way that I give it significance. Well, that's great. But what happens if I'm a white racist? What happens if I'm an intellectual snob? And I say, you know, I'm more intelligent than you are, so I'm more valuable or significant than you are. And if there is no God, my opinion is just as valuable and accurate as your opinion. And your opinion is just as accurate and valuable as my opinion. And if we contradict each other, we got to realize it's all relative. So it really doesn't matter what we say and what we believe. In fact, to have a conversation where we disagree is really a waste of time because everything, baby, is relative. No, you know better than that. You know that the issue of taking a human life involves some pretty intense, deep issues, significant issues. So you got to learn to think it through carefully, praying to God for wisdom. How do I make a decision on this? That issue for me is not that big, but I'll tell you the one that is big. What's the biggest killer of human life today? Starvation. Do you know that we have the solution for starvation? It's called money. It's called buying food. It's called getting that food to starving kids so you can put food in their mouth. Do you know what it's like for me? If I go up to this guy who's got a starving kid and I say, I'm a follower of Christ, and he says, oh, well, that's wonderful, Cliff. My kid is starving. And I say, well, you all have a good day, will you? Yeah, we know what that is. Stinking hypocrisy. I'm a hypocrite. If he's got a starving kid, I better get off my backside. I better make as much money as I can, and I better go out and buy food and feed his starving kid. So the obviously difficult ethical question is, how much money do I keep for myself and how much do I give away to feed starving children? And when you put your faith in Christ, you got to start thinking through that stuff. You got to start thinking, okay, I'm here at Texas State, I'm getting a good education, I'm going to have some great career potential, I'm going to be able to make some bucks. Now, when I make those bucks, how much am I going to keep for myself and how much am I going to give away to feed starving people in the name of Christ? So that's similar to your question you're asking, and it's the issue of human value, human dignity. And if you take God out of that picture, you're up a creek without a paddle when it comes to explaining to me why are human beings valuable. Stuart, what do you think?
Was the Roman centurion told by the Apostle Paul when he was saved, if you remember, the earthquake happened, this Roman centurion, tough blue-collar guy, he said, I need a miracle if I'm ever going to believe. Well, he got a miracle. A lot of people did not get a miracle in the Bible, and they never believed. Some did believe. He got a miracle. Did Paul then say, all right, now that you're saved, stop being a Roman centurion. Get out of the naval force. Do not be a police officer. No, Paul never said that. He upheld the military. The government did not wield the sword in vain. Paul said that when Nero was in power, by the way, who was lighting his gardens with the bodies of Christians. So tremendous respect for authority, and yet also challenging the authority at the same time. Was God sinning by saying that the Israelites should use just war at certain times in the Old Testament? Was God sinning by saying that? Going back against his own commandment to be pacifists? No, he was not sinning. God is perfect. Okay, so we see that there's obviously a place for it. Now, the temptation is to become the good old boys, the tough guys, and let's just go ahead and, again, dehumanize those who are in the Middle East, those who are in whatever part of the world. I met a very gifted sniper once in South Carolina. This guy could not get off alcohol and drugs, even when we were together, because he had so much guilt over sniping family members who were outside of the terrorist that they were targeting. All right, so what had he started to do with his buddies? Dehumanize the group that they were after. So a Christian is never to dehumanize. A Christian is to understand all are created in God's image. Some people, all of us to an extent, some people more so than others, are horribly defaced because of the devil, because of flesh, because of our government even, different forces. But we're always to treat other people as though they are created in the image of God, because they truly are.
What's the hardest issue that just it makes it so difficult?
I would say maybe just the unforgivable action of taking another life in combat. It just, well, not just a single life. So let's say we have to maybe call field artillery and they strike a building and it just happen to be casualty. Like it feels like that's just an internal conflict that might be forgivable.
Okay, but why are you in the armed forces then? If that's the big issue for you, why are you serving in the armed forces?
So I served in the armed forces, one, because I feel like that was the main call of my life. Like that's the only thing I've had a desire to do. And then it was also the not only that, but it's more of a family tradition to join the armed forces.
Okay. So I hope that you will question your family traditions the same way I had to. I grew up in a home where Jesus Christ was worshipped by mom and dad, but I couldn't believe in Jesus just because mom and dad did, right? Jesus is not the truth because mom and dad tell me he's the truth. Jesus is not the truth because a church tells me he's the truth. Something is true regardless of who believes in it or who disbelieves in it, because truth is reality. A big battleship was going through the night and it was foggy out. And all of a sudden they saw a signal down the water a bit, and the signal said, "Alter your course 10 degrees north." And the captain said, No. Tell them to alter their course 10 degrees south. And the signal came back, "Alter your course 10 degrees north." And the guy said, No, wait a second. Send back the message, "Alter your course 10 degrees south." I'm a battleship, knowing the fear that would strike into the oncoming boat's captain's heart. And to the shock and amazement of the admiral of that ship, that naval ship, the message came back, "Alter your course 10 degrees south. I am a lighthouse." See, truth exists separate from what I believe. And if I'm headed towards a rock, a lighthouse, I better alter my course and get in touch with reality. So Jesus Christ made this incredible claim, "I am the truth." Regardless of what mom and dad believe, regardless of what the church says, regardless of what your culture says, I am the truth. Now, he's either blowing smoke, he's either a liar, or else he's speaking the truth. And if he's speaking the truth, you and I want to be in touch with reality. And that's why putting your faith in him, if the evidence is he's reliable, is such a wise decision. And you see, I think the evidence of the way Jesus treated people, the evidence of his ethical teaching, the evidence of the way he died, loving and forgiving his enemies who were nailing him to a cross, and the evidence of the way he rose from the dead points to him being trustworthy. That's why for you to put your faith in Christ is not a leap into la-la land, fantasy land. or cultural bias or family bias. No, you're putting your faith in the real Jesus Christ, who is reliable and credible.
Like if I could put my faith in Christ and still have that occupation.
Well, I sure hope so.
That was my real concern.
Oh, you bet. Officers Christian Fellowship is one of the finest Christian fellowships in the United States, and it's all in the Navy. It's all in the Navy and Army and Marines. Officers Christian. Yeah, you can be a follower of Christ and serve in the armed forces, absolutely, because God has instituted government to maintain justice and order in society. That's the primary first reason for government, to protect the innocent from being ripped off and slaughtered. So yes, you can be a follower of Christ, a genuine follower of Christ, and serve in the military, and you'll begin to discover that there are a whole slew of folks in the United States Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, who are deeply committed to Christ.
My question is, it's kind of been sitting on me for a while. In Psalms 25:14, it says, "The friendship of the Lord is for those who fear him." And I feel like I kind of understand what fearing God means, like you're respecting or reverent, and you're following his commands. But I feel like there's a different kind of relationship you can have with God and like a closeness with Jesus. But I'm trying to figure out how you know, like, when you're really close with Jesus and you don't feel like distance in your prayer life and like in relationship with other people too, if that makes sense.
First point would be fear. If you fear God, you will fear nothing. If you don't fear God, you will fear everything. To fear God means to stand in awe of him, to find him the thing that is most worthy, the thing that you think most about. So when you pull up to a stoplight today, or when your mind is wandering a little bit, maybe in the library, where does your mind gravitate most easily to, without any kind of forcefulness or restraint? Whatever it gravitates most naturally to, that's what you fear most, that's what you stand in awe of the most. That is your God. Thirdly, my dad met with Kanye West. I did not. Kanye West, I don't know if you guys have seen that viral clip, it's got like 20 million views, where he said back in like the early 2000s, if I don't make it as a rapper, I'll make it in the NBA easily. I'll be one of the top players. Well, my dad played an hour and a half of basketball with him, and he said Kanye hit about 2 shots out of 200. So self-confidence will only get you so far. Kanye, obviously a very gifted brother, though. Sad to see the mental health side of things for him. But he said something very interesting on the fear of God. He knows what the fear of God is, by the way. He has a pretty high theology when he's well. And he knows that the fear of God is obeying God, standing in awe of him, as well as worshiping him as your Lord and Savior, and that brings freedom. When the Kim Kardashian thing occurred, and it was really sad, the whole breakdown, and my dad counseled him some through that when Kim was in New York City for SNL. When that happened, I saw a lot of clips go out afterwards saying, I don't fear somebody who tries to control me. And God is a God of manipulation and control. Don't trust him. And you can see this anger seething out of him. And I thought, wow, that is so sad, because he knows he does not believe that. He is running from God in tremendous bitterness and resentment because of what's going on with his family. And Pete Davidson, he had that song, Kill Pete Davidson, all this rage coming out of him, which was kind of like the psalmist in a way. The psalmist did say, for example, break the jaw of my enemy. He did say, bash babies' heads on rocks, alluding to his enemies. Tremendous justice. And yet Kanye went too far, turning that fully on God and completely misrepresenting what fear of God is. So last point, closeness with God. You do it through obvious scripture memory. I like to slow it down though, read formationally, which is slow it down and ask the text questions. How does this apply to my life? If I were to take this seriously today, how would I live differently? God, what could you be saying to me? Then informationally, just read as quickly as possible, as much as possible, so you can get the narrative arc of Scripture. Then move into Lectio Divina, which is more so emotions and worship, which is you go to the Psalms and you read one verse over and over again. And that lights the Holy Spirit on fire. Next would be worship music. A lot of good worship music out there right now. If you haven't heard of Keith Green, check out Keith Green. white boy, big afro, back in the 80s, sad Jesus freak, sadly died in a horrible plane accident. But I wake up to him most mornings, and it drives my kids and my wife bonkers that I listen to him loudly when I'm doing the dishes in the morning. But find your type of worship music, because that gets what we're talking about up here, good, solid, hopefully, Christian thinking, and worship gets that head knowledge down into your heart.
I am actually not a Christian, and my question that I have for you guys today is, how can I trust God even though he created Satan? Because we know that God is omnipotent and all-powerful, and did the angels not know that too? Did they just start a rebellion even though that they knew it was futile, or did they not know it was futile? Like, is he stupid? Like, what is this? But yeah, pretty much he made this guy anyway, and he knew he was going to. Did God just create someone to just deceive us? Like, what is this? Why can't I trust God?
Okay, did God create this shirt?
I guess he created everything by proxy. But I don't know if that means he directly made it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I would argue that God did not create this shirt. I think the tailor did. Okay? I would argue that God did not create the Holocaust. Hitler, Adolf Eichmann, and the other Nazis did. I would argue that God did not create this building. God did not create the University of Georgia. Some human beings who were very sacrificial and hardworking worked hard, and they built this great university. Second point. God created us to love him and to love others. Let's say you've been dating a woman for the past month, and she said, "I love you, man." How would you feel if tonight your father called you up and said, "Son, I've been paying her $1,000 a month to love you"? I think you'd be really bummed out, right? Because love, in order to be real, has to be free. Otherwise, it ain't love. So when God creates us to love him and to love each other, he's not creating us as his little robots. He's not creating us perfect, if you define perfect as a computer printout that's perfect. No, you and I are not perfect computer printouts. You and I are complex human beings with a rational mind, a conscience, and a free will. We've got instincts, but we don't have to follow all of those instincts. Does that make sense so far?
Yes.
Okay, so God created Lucifer as an angel of light to do good. But because God created Lucifer to love him, Lucifer has a free will. Lucifer chose to rebel against God. That's his free will. But guess what? There's coming a day of judgment. And although you and I are free, we are not free to escape the consequences of our decisions. We will be judged by a holy, good God for what we've done wrong, and so will Lucifer.
If you're an angel, I guess, I mean, I wouldn't know what it would be like to be an angel, but like you would have this direct contact with God. I think a lot of the problem with being a human is you don't have God just actively engaging you all the time. So it's easier to be more skeptical. But if you're an angel, there's not really much room for skepticism. You would be dealing with God and be like, okay, this guy is omnipotent. Going against this guy would be futile. So, and he did anyway. So,
yeah.
Now he's got Earth. So,
yeah. And anthropology shows us that around the world, he's given more than enough evidence for any thinking person to believe in him. But I don't have to if I don't want to. And that's what it gets down to. It gets down to the will. Albert Einstein said, the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. In other words, if there is no God, nature's an accident, and so is my rational mind. It's an accident. Which means, how can this accident called the rational mind do good science in order to understand the universe? And Einstein was right. The most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it's comprehensible, that we can understand it by doing good science, by using our rational minds well. But if it's an accident, if this is just a highly developed monkey's mind, and if the universe is just an accident, why is there this correlation where I, with my rational mind, can unlock the secrets of the universe by doing good science? So you see, nobody has an excuse to be an atheist or an agnostic because the universe is not religiously ambiguous. Oh, I'm just not sure. No, it's real clear. Some type of mind exists.
what makes sense is that, yeah, the Big Bang makes sense, and that something forming out of nothing doesn't make sense. So there was probably something behind it. So great. There's probably something supernatural going on. And then that's where y'all take it and be like, okay, here's this big book called the Bible. And it talks all about this God that made the heavens and the earth and did all these things. And there's an Old Testament and a New Testament. And that doesn't fall for me. But the Big Bang and the supernatural, I can track on that. I just don't have any connection with that, I guess.
Got it. Okay.
Great.
The Bible is simply this. It's God opening up and saying, this is who I am. In other words, it's God revealing who God is. Now watch this example. Hi, my name's Cliff. What's your name?
John.
Philip.
John.
Harry. Okay, not only am I being rude to John, I'm also being an arrogant twit. I think I know his name better than he does. No, your name is?
My name is John.
Now, if I'm going to get to know John, I'm going to have the humility to allow John to reveal himself to me. I can't just sit here and say, oh yeah, you're John. No, he's got to reveal that to me. And obviously, in terms of building a friendship with John, I'm going to have the humility to allow John to reveal to me who he is. Okay, you do that all the time. Every friend you have has opened up and told you the truth about herself or himself. Now, what the Bible claims is, what Jesus claimed is, I am God opening up and revealing to you who I really am. Now, the majority of people who claim that, we lock up in mental hospitals. They're off balance emotionally, right? They're a Messiah complex. They're deranged. But when you read the Gospels, you notice Matthew 5, 6, and 7, the Sermon on the Mount, is ethical genius. Whoever put that together, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, was an ethical genius. Why? Because all the writings on ethics over the past 2,000 years are simply footnotes to the Sermon on the Mount. Secondly, you watch the way Jesus treated people, the depth and quality of his friendships. And you notice not a fanatic, not an idiot, you notice, gosh, this guy understood people and knew how to connect and build meaningful relationships. Thirdly, you watch him die on a cross, forgiving those guys who nailed him to the cross, and the respect just grows as you say, oh my goodness, if I was in that position, I'd be cursing my enemies. But fourthly, and most importantly, 3 days after he dies, he physically, bodily rises from the dead. And over a period of 40 days, Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 15, he appears to over 500 people who see him risen from the dead. You die and rise from the dead, I promise to listen very carefully to everything you have to say. So you see, it's this resurrection of Christ from the dead that points to him being totally credible, totally trustworthy, which is why faith in him and trusting him to reveal God accurately, like I'm beginning to trust John to reveal himself accurately to me, is such a wise decision.
It's just the understanding, the evidence with Christ is always the thing that gets you. It's like, okay, if I believe that Christ died and there's all these witnesses, therefore I can believe everything in the Old Testament and be like, okay, so now God never changes, right? Because he's all just the same always, because he's God, he's perfect.
Yeah.
But then you just see all this crazy stuff going on in the Old Testament. Like, I think there's a story that I don't like in 1 Samuel where there's the guy that tries to catch the altar and God just strikes him dead instantly because you're not allowed to do that. That's God's altar, you can't touch it. But God should have understood that he was maybe trying to honor him, or I'm not sure if that's exactly how the story went, but that kind of freaks me out.
Sure it does.
Yeah, he could just, there's the potential for me in trying to honor him, he'll just strike me dead. And that doesn't sound very loving, and I think there wouldn't be a good reason to believe this otherwise if it weren't for this evidence of the New Testament and Jesus' ministry, which he was certainly a real person that was crucified, but then the evidence for the resurrection is where things get fuzzy, but that's pretty much what's on my mind.
Okay, and that's a great issue. It's a hard issue. Thank you for raising it. It's this whole idea of God judging that turns me off, turns you off. All right? But let's think about the alternative. God doesn't judge. So I get a little kid here. I beat him to a pulp. The police officer comes over to me and says, Cliff, what did you do? And I say, well, officer, I just beat the little kid to a pulp. If the officer looks me in the face and says, let's go to Starbucks, do we have a problem? Yeah.
Probably hit the kid in the head.
We got a big problem. You know what the problem is? That little kid doesn't matter to the police. I can beat the little kid to a pulp. When the police confront me with my action, they don't do anything but just say, let's go get something at Starbucks. That kid doesn't matter to the police. Same way with God. If God doesn't judge us for evil, it means it doesn't matter what we do. And according to God and Christ, it does matter what we do. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Good. Excellent. Now, let's be real honest. The bloodiest book in the Bible is not in the Old Testament. The bloodiest book in the Bible is in the New Testament.
It's got to be Revelation, right?
Okay, man, you're thinking. Great. The blood flows more in Revelation than in any other book in the Bible. So the Bible's very consistent. God loves you, and God judges evil. And guess what, sir? Almost everybody here has a problem with the problem of suffering and evil. Every atheist that I know has a problem with the problem of suffering and evil, and almost every Christian has a problem with the problem of suffering and evil. Okay, we all have a problem with it. On the cross, Christ took the judgment that we deserve for our evil that messes up this world, thereby offering us forgiveness, which means God knows there's a difference between good and evil, and God is willing to absorb the penalty that we deserve for our participation in evil, which means God is a suffering God who just doesn't say, suck it up and here comes my judgment. No, he's a gracious, forgiving God who says, I offer you forgiveness for real evil, and I'm going to judge the world one day, and evil is going to lose. I mean, just think about it, sir. If there is no God and no day of judgment, evil wins. Powerful, wealthy, evil people get away with murder. It's tragic. It happens. And Jesus says, no, it's not going to ultimately win. Stuart, anything to add?
At the very end of Matthew. So you're looking at Jesus' resurrection and then his ascension. Talks about in the 40 days between his resurrection and ascension, he did many proofs to prove that he was God. But this gets back to your very fundamental first question, which I really like. Not on the angels one, it was the second one on, well, the angels clearly had this incredible connection with God, so why didn't they just believe? Well, this gets at the very heart of the gospel, which is so many people knew him, but the text says at the very end of the Gospel of Matthew, many doubted and some even turned away. They were with him at the resurrection. They were with him for 40 days, and before that, getting all these endless amounts of proofs. Why didn't they have the strongest faith? They should have had tremendously strong faith, but they turned away. They turned away in some way. Well, they definitely turned away in a way that's more of a head scratcher than why in the world are there so many Christians here who haven't turned away? Are they just a lot more gullible or psychologically ill, the Christians here? I would say no, I think it's more of a heart matter. And this is why the great mathematician from the 1600s, Blaise Pascal, strong Christian, said that God gives those who have an open heart enough evidence to believe in him. But those with a closed heart, not enough evidence to believe in him. And so a lot of those who doubted and turned away said, this walk is a little too tough. I don't like not having my own identity. I have to give my identity over to Christ. That sounds a little restrictive. I want to sleep around as much as possible, or be unfaithful to my wife, or I want to cheat on that exam. I don't want Jesus telling me how to live. And so I've seen many people, sadly, come to my office as a pastor and turn away from the faith because of stuff like that. Does that make sense? Because another part of that fascinating passage at the end there of the Gospel of Matthew, if this was not true, that many doubted and all of a sudden disbelieved and fell away from the faith, if that was not true, why would the Gospel writers have included that? Why would Matthew have included that? Any text critic would say, no, he would not have included that. He would have glossed it over. But because he included that, it shows that it must really have happened. It's kind of like Peter denying Christ to a 7-year-old girl. Why would the gospel writers, Mark especially, why would he have included that? He's Peter's biographer. Peter knew that was going in, and he said, keep it in there. Okay, you don't have that in any other ancient document from that time period with these great heroes. Alexander the Great, find me a story like that. Find me a story like that in the Iliad. They're just not in there. So it shows that this is written as historical evidence that is kept intact because it really occurred.
The Old Testament is filled with accounts of the people of Israel and Judah turning their backs on God and God punishing them. And same with the people invading the lands of Israel and Judah. And the deaths were numbering in the hundreds of thousands. I can't even begin to comprehend the amounts of lives that were lost. Could you speak a little bit more towards God's decision to do that? Because it's something that I have a lot of confusion with.
God is in a position to judge. Because God is just, his judgments are just. Because God is loving, he offers everybody grace. But when a group of people or an individual insists upon perpetrating evil on and on and on, God judges. So God used the Jews to judge the Canaanites, Hittites, Philistines, Amorites, because they were perverting the worship of God by saying, you want to know God? Have sex with a temple prostitute. You want to know God better? Take your baby and offer it as a sacrifice on an altar. And God said enough, and he judged him. The reason that is not genocide is because a couple of hundred years later, God used first the Assyrians and then the Babylonians to judge the Jews for their engagement in temple prostitution and sacrificing their babies on altars. So God is just, God is fair. And if you want to do evil and refuse to repent, ultimately he will judge you, either in this life or in the life after. When America says that you just are an isolated individual and what you do has no impact on little kids, elderly, family, neighbors, no. The Bible has a much more comprehensive view of human beings. What I do has ripple effects into the life of my son, my grandchildren, my neighbors. If you think that UMass Amherst was put together last summer, you are naive. UMass Amherst, this very fine university, was put together over a long period of time by a lot of people who worked and sacrificed to bring this university into existence. In the same way that people have made very good decisions, like putting UMass Amherst together, people have made very irresponsible decisions, like destroying their bodies with smoke, like ripping people off and putting them in a position to get cancer because they did not want to take care of waste from a factory. And the list goes on and on, be it racism, sexism, genocide, violence, of how we make decisions that have ripple effects down through the ages. And so you're right. When God judged the Philistines, the Amorites, the Hittites, there were some innocent people who were swept along in that judgment, as there were probably at the time of the flood of Noah, as there are today. When God judges, it doesn't mean he just plucks the evil people out and lets the innocent people survive. No, he doesn't do it that way. He judges a culture, a society, a group. The classic example of this is Genesis chapter 18. Abraham is standing over the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. God says, I'm going to judge them. And Abraham says, what if there are 50 righteous people down there? You still going to judge them? God says, no. 45, 40, 35, 30, 25, 20, 15, 10. And God says, no. If there are 10 righteous people down there, I'm not going to judge it. Well, why didn't Abraham go 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? I don't know. But the question that Abraham was struggling with is the judge of the whole earth just? And when he counted down to 10 people, obviously Abraham decided in his own mind, indeed God is just. The cross of Christ is a clear statement. God is just. The wages of sin is death, but God is also gracious, loving, and merciful, and that's why Christ sacrificed his life on a cross to pay the penalty for our wrongdoing, to give us forgiveness and eternal life.
how do you navigate feeling disconnected with God, and how when sometimes you speak to him, it just feels like you're like speaking into thin air and like not receiving anything back?
How do you navigate your feelings about God?
Like when you feel disconnected
Yeah,
from him.
when you feel disconnected and when you feel connected.
Yeah.
Feelings are like an emotional roller coaster, but I find great comfort in the Psalms. At times the psalmist felt very close to God, and at other times the psalmist felt very far away from God. I'm not going to base my life on my feelings. I'm going to base my life on Christ's promises. He is reliable. My feelings are not reliable, because my feelings go all over the map. Please do not build your life on your feelings. Build your life on God's love for you. Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. I love Lamentations chapter 3, verses 19 to 24. I remember my affliction and my wandering, the bitterness and the gall. I well remember them, and my soul is downcast within me. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, I am comforted. Because his compassions never fail, I'm okay. His faithfulness is rock solid. I will trust in him. When we put our faith in Christ, we are trusting his character, which is good, faithful, compassionate, totally in great integrity. So let's base our lives on that. And now, Stuart, you kid.
Probably a good amount of you here who are like, well, what the heck? I don't feel my faith after getting baptized. It's been 3 weeks. I felt this ecstatic high after getting baptized. I thought I was this new Christian. I thought everything was great, gonna be great now. You know, roses for the rest of my life. But then all of a sudden, now they don't feel faith. And so did I never have faith? They start to wonder. I thought this whole faith walk was all about emotions and feeling good. And that's when we have to respond and say, well, sorry, we did not communicate well enough then. We let you down by not communicating clearly enough that everybody, starting with King David, but going back to Abraham, looking at Esther, for example, some of the great women and men of faith, all of them had emotional lows where they couldn't feel God's presence. I've been in Psalm 56 recently. It's really been helping me with this good question you're asking, which is grow in stability of your faith. It's not about the emotional roller coasters. And David says this fascinating thing where he's saying that even when I fear, I'm growing in trusting you, O Lord. I find that fascinating. Even while I fear, I'm growing in trusting you, O Lord. All right, so he's saying it's not like you're trusting God and have all your emotions perfectly in order and have all this peace and joy. But he's also not saying, oh, here it is, I don't feel faith and I'm depressed and I'm anxious. No, he's saying a lot of those bad, toxic emotions are gonna remain, but I'm still growing and trusting in God. So he says that in 56, which I like, because when I get anxious and that happens way too often, I can lean into, whoa, got it. I can trust you and grow in my relationship with you while this anxiety lasts. This anxiety is not gonna control my life. This anxiety is not gonna determine how I look at you and what my relationship with you is truly like. But then at other times in the Psalms, David does say, hey, look, I'm being anxious right now. Why are you downcast, O my soul? Chapter 42 and 43. Why so disturbed within me? Put your hope in God, for you praise him, my Savior and my Lord. So what is he saying there? He's saying, I'm anxious. I'm going to grow in my trust with God by praising him and thanking him. And so he works to defeat the anxiety, but at other times he says, look, this anxiety has me, but I can still grow in trusting in God and his promises despite the bad feelings.
Truth is simply what I do not think there is a single objective truth.
But what is truth, though? What objective, subjective, what is truth?
It is an understanding of everything and how everything interacts with each other. And I understand that's an abstract concept, but it's something that cannot truly be achieved.
The majority of people I've heard, at least who I respect, define truth as that which connects most with reality. Truth is that which comports most with reality. And so we can do these theoretical jumping jacks all we want, but what is your experience really connected to? What is reality? And I don't think what you're saying is truly your reality. Because based off of what you're saying in your definition of truth, it's your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth. We can't really know any type of objective truth. So if I have the truth of survival of the fittest, which is my friend who has a son who has Down syndrome, I look at him as less valuable than me because he's less fit than me. And so if I was in the Netherlands, it'd be just totally okay to say I think all Down syndrome babies should be aborted, which is what the government's doing. That's their cure for Down syndrome, just to kill all the babies. That's their truth. So don't tell them that they're wrong, because they're actually living just out of the evolutionary cycle of the strong eat the weak, and we need to preserve the strong in order to create a better society. I'm down with that. I'm good with that. If there is no God, I'm with it.
If you genuinely believe that that belief is a harmful belief, you should speak out against that belief.
What is harmful?
Harmful is whatever you dictate is...
Well, but they don't think it's harmful. They actually think it's helping society by killing Down syndrome babies.
Then you try to convince them otherwise.
Because it's a tax on society. But who are you to convince them otherwise? If your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth.
I try to convince them otherwise.
Why?
I want to convince them.
Just because you want to?
Yes.
That sounds very relative. Yep. What if you don't want to another day? But then the other day you have this great type of, I want to live for human rights. Doesn't it sound a little mercurial to base off truth or morality based off of that type of definition? I think you need something a little more stable.
Morality should be a complete analysis that you have made over the course of your life of what you believe is best, where best is defined as what is a subjective analysis of how you should act and how others should act in an idea.
Sorry, can you come a little bit further? These guys can't hear over here.
Sorry. I don't think that just because you are feeling depressed one day doesn't really change your morals. You will still believe what you believe tomorrow.
No, but that's just it though. You won't just believe what you believe tomorrow. We see endless examples of this. Someone can turn psychotic and say, no, that's not my truth tomorrow. Hitler became more evil if you look at his autobiographies. I don't think he was ever a great guy, but he definitely became more evil in his understanding of how to judge the Jews. So to base a moral system off of how a Hitler thinks, how I think, how you think, based off of feelings, is scary. Or based off of the lobster I ate last night and the gas that I'm now, unfortunately, exerting today that my wife and kids, unfortunately, had to experience this morning in our hotel room. Do you know what I mean? Like any type of moral system can be set based off of our own mercurial hearts, our own gas, our own neurochemicals. I think we want something, and I think your experience connects with something that's a little more secure, a little more objective. Because again, if we go with your moral system, here's another way to look at it. You keep saying feelings, and that's consistent as well. The reason why my dad and I like you so much is for a number of reasons. But one of the reasons is you do seem very consistent. I don't think your consistency connects really at all with reality, but at least you're being very consistent. And I would push you again, if you're gonna remain in your consistency, then morality is just a feeling, and it's actually something that's immaterial. If there is no God, then there is no immaterial. So it's actually just this type of fabricated offshoot of evolution. And so morality doesn't really exist. Free will doesn't really exist. Consciousness doesn't really exist. Love doesn't really exist. Beauty doesn't really exist. Our sharing information, that's immaterial, doesn't really exist. These are all just illusions, and our brains are just fooling us. And you just said yes to all of those. Free will is an illusion, consciousness is an illusion, morality is an illusion, beauty is an illusion, love is an illusion. Literally all the things we live out on a day-to-day basis that are real to us, I think they're real to us, you just said are an illusion.
Whether they're real or an illusion doesn't really matter in my opinion, because think of it like a dream. You can enjoy a dream despite not knowing it's not real. And you can live throughout the dream, but none of what's happening in the dream is actually happening. It's just make believe. And yet you can still enjoy it and find joy in that fact.
Yeah.
You ignore the fact that it all doesn't matter, and you live as if it does matter.
Okay.
That's better.
Oh, you're so consistent. I love it so much.
That's what you believe is best for you.
Yes.
And that is, I think, how people in general should live. As Albert Camus once said we should live with irony, despite the fact that we may very well live in a deterministic world, similarly to how one can enjoy a dream despite knowing it's not real.
Yep, and Camus also said that the only question that modern man has to answer is why not kill himself. You sound excited about Camus' philosophy there, which again is consistent because it's tremendously relative. There's no objective meaning and purpose in life. There is no God. There is no heaven out there. So why wouldn't I just end it all? Camus said that. Sartre said that. Like, why do you have value and worth? Because it sounds to me like you're just saying these things don't really matter. They don't really exist. And I just have to get up and get on with my life. Like one famous atheist one time told me and my dad, she said, hey, look, I realize there's no meaning and purpose in life. And I realize I'm just a highly evolved animal. And so when suffering really hits, I gotta say, I'm not really suffering, or it's at least not morally repugnant. So I need to say, kids are starving to death, but just get up and get on with it. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're saying, and it's tremendously consistent, and I applaud you for that.
So why do you make money in that case? If you know that that money isn't really anything of value, why do you?
Okay, again, you're being so painfully consistent, I just hate it and love it at the same time. So money is not just a social construct. You don't just always make money just because it's something to be poisoned or however else you put it more eloquently than I put it. A Christian makes money because they want to live out the greatest commandment, which is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Well, in order to love your neighbor, you have to serve them. In order to serve them, unfortunately, oftentimes that takes money. Right? We can't all just live out voluntary poverty. So
money
as a means to help other people. Yes, you want to make as much as you can, save as much as you can, and give away as much as you can as a Christian. The Bible talks about a man who cannot make money to help his family survive is worse than a non-believer. So money is tremendously good, but there's something about money that I think all of our experience, yet again, backs up what the Bible teaches, which is money is good in and of itself, but it can be poisoned quicker than just about anything else, and we can become greedy like that. So money is not just a social construct. If we look at it that way, we cheapen money. And that's why there's gambling addictions, because we just cheapen it. It's just a social construct. Do whatever you want. Just play the lotto every week. Run out of your money by playing the lotto.
Well,
big part of that, yeah.
Obviously, there is a lot of ethical concerns there, but I won't go.
And so according to your moral system and how you value human beings and how you are valued, I would cheapen money as well. I would not look at money as a serious thing, and I wouldn't look at money in a way where I can really help other people with it. No, again, it's the strong eat the weak, and so it's those who have the right type of connections, those who have the right type of mental acumen to make a lot of money. Don't give it away. That doesn't fit with your theory of morality and your theory of evolution. No, preserve yourself, preserve your family, your tribe, and discard the little boy starving to death in Myanmar. Why would you help them from your perspective? You wouldn't.
No. People also don't act completely rationally. We act with fragmented information. For example, why do you have disposable income at all? Why do you think that, for example, buying a television is more important than saving the lives of children in some impoverished country? Shouldn't you morally then use every single ounce of disposable income you have to support those children? Or are you simply trying to build up more so you can help as much as possible? And that, I don't think people really live like that. I don't think most people think that, oh, I am trying to maximize the welfare of the world with every single thing that I do. And I think that some of it is a bit selfish in that people feel good when they help others. This fact comes as a byproduct of evolution, because sometimes collusion is more beneficial.
But that's exactly what Jesus Christ, he would disagree strongly with you on this point. Because you said empathy is just a byproduct of evolution. Altruism, to a point. But Jesus would say, no, it doesn't matter if you feel empathetic at one point. It doesn't matter if you feel altruistic at another point. You should be altruistic. You should be empathetic and help the person, the Good Samaritan. the Jew dying in the street. You should actually help them, not just, oh, I'm just a product of evolution, and I feel today like maybe I'll go over and help them. So it's a tough ethical question. But Jesus Christ would say you always should ethically serve and help, no matter what. And so you bring up another ethical dilemma. Why does any Christian have a television set? Should they never be taking part in recreation? Should they just always be serving? I think there's a balance there. I think primarily we should be serving and glorifying God with our finances, our time, but to also experience his gifts, his blessings, is also a great thing and also important with other people. So it's a balance. But again, if you're just living by, we were created with a certain level of empathy, so at times live into that empathy to help somebody else, but at other times you don't need to, because it's just a feeling that sometimes is there and other times just bypasses me. I don't think you can truly live that out. I think, sir, you at your very core are going to say if somebody is harmed across campus, and especially if it's somebody I don't know across the world, you are still going to say, help that person. Doesn't matter how I feel, doesn't matter how you feel, go and help that person. Based off of that moral system that you're espousing, society will break down, I promise you.
I would say that because...
I'm just thankful that you don't live that out, though.
My belief is stronger. My belief that my belief is stronger than your belief convinces me to tell you, hey, we should go help that person, because I very stalwartly believe that we should help that person. If my belief was not as stalwart as it is that we should help that person, then I wouldn't tell you anything. Similarly to how if you're holding a door for someone, you want to hold the door for someone because it's a nice thing to do. But
according to who? No, objectively at your core, you know, I know, everybody here knows. Please hold that door open. Don't let them get smashed in the face. There's a reason why that man who just fell, so many people ran over to him. I'm glad we didn't all run over. Obviously, that could cause mass chaos. But I'm glad people got up and ran over. Why? Not just because they were a similar type of monkey to the person who ran over. Not just because it's a type of kin attraction or a level of subjective empathy. No, it's because they know that person has value, created in God's image. And so I want to help that person, and I should help that person no matter what.
That's an understandable belief. However, I personally don't think that people have intrinsic value. Rather, value comes from, it's a social construct which developed through a long line of civilizations which came about as a result of evolution. In the end, I believe that everything that is occurring is just cosmic fairies. It just incidentally happened to be the way it is. And I understand that may be sort of cynical, and most people would not like to live that way. But that is the way.
But it's not about most people wanting to not live that way. It's what does the evidence show? Does the evidence point to there's life after death? Does the evidence point to you're going to fall through a trap door one day, sir, into the arms of a loving creator, or just into plain darkness? And you'll never see any loved ones again. This whole planet and everything that you did was a total just waste of time, because there is no eternity out there. This entire universe is just going to die in a heat death. So why does anything matter whatsoever? Why should I love my neighbor? Why not just live a hedonistic life that's all about me? Why not just live based off of the ethical system that you buy into? If you scratch my back, if you connect me with the right people in order to get a job after I graduate from UMass, if you're helping me get ahead, if you're helping me make social connections, if I look good hanging out with you because you're one of the popular types, then hey man, I'm with it, and I'll hang out with you. But, if you lose your money, if you lose your social connections, if you lose your good looks, I'm not gonna hang out with you. Especially if you offend me once, I'm not gonna hang out with you because you're not scratching my back now. Okay, do you think that that's the right way to live? And do you think that that's your experience? Do you think that comports most with reality? Or do you think what Jesus Christ said, which is no, you bear each other's burdens, you stay committed, you love one another, you fight for loyalty, you fight for a hope beyond the grave, you fight for objective morality, you fight for human rights. See, human rights didn't come about until Christianity began. Because the idea of sacrificing for somebody who looks differently than you, different gender, different ethnicity, different race, different age, that whole idea in the Roman Empire and the known world was ridiculous, to sacrifice for them. But then Christ comes around and says, no, yeah, you're to debase yourself, no matter who you are, to sacrifice and love the poor, someone who's radically different from you. You're trying to push back against your Judeo-Christian cultural values so hard and say, it's got to be this way, which is a very depressed type of living because there is no hope beyond the grave and everything is just relative and you just create your own meaning in your head. I create my own. But I think your lifestyle today will not match that.